What's up everyone, Kaze no What If is here with What If Naruto had the Sharingan. Before we start, if you like the video, like it, share with your friends, comment, and let's start the video. Are you sure about this? Yes, Hokage-sama, 18 participants made it to the tower in time. A preliminary round is advisable. The Hokage slumped his shoulders in defeat and nodded his head. 5 days had passed since the beginning of this part of the Chunin exams, and every team possible had already made its way to the tower. He just wishes not as many would have made it. Holding a preliminary round isn't something he sought to do, especially after what happened in the forest. On the bright side, for him at least, the feeling of pride he felt for the amount of Konoha shinobi that had made it to the tower was very rewarding. Even more was that 3 out of the 5 Konoha squads were rookie teams. Very well then, have a squad of Umbu collect those who were less fortunate and escort them out of the forest. He looked at his assistant with a stern face and added, "You know what to do about those who didn't make it?" Hiruzen isn't a fan of death, the mere thought of mostly young children. There were some old genins out there. Kami knows Kasuke is still alive only because he's too stubborn to kick the bucket. Dying in such an undignified way was sickening to the very least. No matter how hard he tried to preach the use of lethal force only when necessary, there were always those who wouldn't listen and rejoiced in unnecessary bloodshed. Such is the life of a shinobi, he supposes. Every arriving team had gathered around the arena in the middle of the tower, the eyes of Team 7 and 10 set on Team 9 and their as of yet absent member. None of them had been informed of what had happened with him after their encounter. They actually hadn't been informed about what had happened at all. The secrecy was so great they almost felt like Orochimaru was only a figment of their imaginations. It definitely wasn't. When Naruto had approached Kakashi to inquire about Niji's status, the only answer he had gotten was, "We dealt with it." Not that he knew what dealing with it implied, he guessed it most likely meant Niji's curse mark had been removed in some way. His sensei wasn't very sharing about the details though. The only thing he had gotten out of it was the name of what the treacherous Sunin had done to Niji. Ten no Juin he called it, Orochimaru's very own cursed mark. Sick bastard. The Sandaime Hokage made his way to the front of the crowd with the Jounin sensei and a big statue of a hand holding a ram seal behind. He stood there in front of the gathered genin looking every bit as powerful as you would expect from a man of his reputation despite his age. "It is with great honor that I congratulate you all for getting this far in the exams. You have made both your senseis and villages proud." Even though the majority of the genin were Konoha shinobi, there were 2 foreign teams, and despite not holding any respect for the powerful man, they couldn't help but feel smug at his words. "I shall now tell you all about what's next to come in the following test, but first, I must tell you what the real purpose of the Chunin exams is." Surprised looks could be seen in the faces of most of the gathered genin. No doubt the ones who didn't look that way had already heard this little speech before. "Isn't the point of the exams finding who deserves to be promoted, Hokage-sama?" asked Shikamaru in his ever-lazy tone. "That is true." The Hokage looked at him and nodded before turning his gaze back to the public, "But there's more to it than just that. The whole truth is that these exams started as a substitute for war." A hand started rubbing Ino's chin as she thought hard about the Hokage's words, before giving up. A substitute for war? What does that even mean? "These exams started shortly after the great nations stopped fighting with each other. We all send our best, most promising genin to fight and represent our villages in a somewhat controlled environment." "Why is that necessary?" asked Shikamaru. "Feudal lords of all places attend these events, the daimyo from all the great nations do as well. They are the ones who provide us with most of our mission income." Sarutobi looked around and could see some troubled looks around the genin. Naruto was one of those genins. He didn't like the idea of being used that way, even if it was for the good of his village. Call him selfish, but isn't it a bit weird that the 5 Kage and the leaders of the smaller villages send some of their young forces to situations where they're going to come face to face with death just for show? I know what some of you are thinking and I can agree to a certain degree, but this is, for the lack of a better word, a necessary evil. The exams allow for a simulation of battle between the nations where each of our leaders get to gauge our strengths and weaknesses while avoiding futile crushing of the other's military forces and useless bloodshed. He turned to look at his surrogate grandson for a second before moving forward with the test. It is a reality he and his comrades had to face at some point. Everyone could see reason in the Hokage's words. It was disturbing to say the least to think that a battle of genin could serve as a deterrent for war to the great nations, but in some weird way it made sense. Shikamaru still thinks it's a risky system at best. Surely you can't hope to keep the balance of the nations this way. Is the amount of missions a village gets truly an accurate testament of their power? It's somewhat unnerving that they had to put their lives at stake as a performance for the daimyos, feudal lords and other important visitors, but they all understood that's what was required of them from their villages. They would comply. It's not like any of them had been forced to participate. Now on to the next part of the X-. Hokage-sama, if I may. A very sickly looking jounin with brown hair tied in a bandana stepped up in front of the Hokage. Igeko Hate would like to explain this part of the exams as the third proctor. The Hokage chuckled and gave the man a polite nod as he stepped back with the jounin senseis and the past proctors of the exams. As you all heard, my name is Gecko Hate and I will be the proctor for the third test of the exams. Now, before we go any further, I must inform you that too many of you reached the tower in time. A preliminary round will be necessary. Just as Hate expected, groans and complaints from the genin were heard all over the room. The third round of these exams will be a tournament consisting of one-on-one matches. As Hokage-sama said, we only want to show our important visitors the best. Hate waved his hand and a couple of Chunin assistants left the room only to come back with a digital screen behind them. You will all face a randomly selected opponent in a battle. The winner of the match gets to compete in the main event. From this point forward you will all be judged as individuals. If any of you wishes to leave the exams or doesn't think themselves capable of handling this, you may quit without fear of repercussion for your teammates. Hate then went into a fit of coughs that made every single aspirant wonder if he should really be out here monitoring the exams. I quit, said Kabuto, startling most of the present genin. I'm almost out of chakra, I'm too tired to continue. Hate nodded. Yakushi Kabuto is out of the competition. Anko and Ibiki watched as he left and started having a conversation of their own about it. The face didn't ring any bells for Ibiki, but Anko had been a part of the exams enough time to recognize his face. It was actually a bit embarrassing for her to just now be noticing that Kabuto always quits at this stage of the exams despite his circumstances. Maybe this wasn't exactly the reason why Kakashi's brat found him suspicious, but it truly is something worth looking into. That actually makes some sense. Kakashi muttered quietly in Hiruzen's ear. What do you mean, Kakashi? He asked. Kakashi turned to look at the teen leaving the arena as his brow furrowed in thought and replied. Anko and I watched him during the whole of the test through the monitors. He never did anything suspicious, but he never did anything that would have left him as tired as he claims to be either. His team ambushed a team rather easily on their way to the tower, and that was the only battle they ever had. Clearly he's just pretending to be tired. Hiruzen didn't bother to speak or reply to Kakashi's explanation, but nodded in acknowledgement and discreetly did a few hand signs for the hidden Umbu in the room to trail Kabuto and see where he's going now. It would seem he really is some sort of spy. After everything that had happened in the forest, Hiruzen was pretty sure he knew who he was working for. If that is all, then we may proc. A door opening in the far left of the room interrupted Hade's explanation and caught everyone's attention. Out of the door walked a recently awakened Niji, looking rested and stoic, like he always does. Without uttering a single word, Niji made his way to his team and stood next to them, dismissing their concerns in the process. Right. Well, if no one else is going to quit, we may proceed, because there's an odd number of participants. One of the matches will be a three-way match. The rules are quite simple. The match is over when one of you can no longer fight, is unconscious or dead. If I deem a match is over, I will jump in and end it myself in hopes of avoiding unnecessary killing. Hayate eyed the genin and gave pointed looks to some of the more unbalanced ones. The proctor started babbling some more stuff, but Sakura completely shut whatever it was he was saying and focused on one of the genin, specifically a sound genin. Sakura isn't a medical genius, yet, but she as well as Naruto and Team 10 watched how Neji attacked the Sasukigai's arm relentlessly. Watching it swell like it did at the time, she had been convinced that it was going to explode, and here he was now, arm heavily bandaged but otherwise functional. He had to have received medical attention, and very good medical attention for that matter. How did he do it? How did he find someone to fix up the extensive damage done to his arm? The sound of the screen going through a rapidly series of names managed to snap Sakura out of her own musing. It kept on rolling for a few more seconds until it stopped in a pair of names that made a certain Hyaga smirk. Hyaga, Neji and Akata Yora, we stay here, the rest of you go to the balconies. Doing as instructed by the proctor, the genin teams went up the stairs on the corners of the room into the balconies, where they were joined by their respective Jounin senseis. Are you both ready? Hayate looked at both remaining genin and received a nod as an answer. He raised his right arm and let it fall back down as he yelled Hajime. Letting his arm fall forwards, Hayate jumped out of the way and let the combatants face each other. Yorawi and Neji eyed each other with a completely calm visage. Without having to wave any hand seals, the Hyaga prodigy's Byakugan came to life. You Hyagas think you're so good. Yorawi snarled and rushed forward. He started throwing fist after fist at Neji, but the Hyaga barely had to make an effort to dodge the strikes and found himself calmly analyzing the weird fighting style of his opponent. His hits looked to be attempts at grabbing him rather than actual hits. Top that with the weird flow of chakra in both of his hands, and it wasn't hard for Neji to figure out what was going on. You're trying to absorb my chakra, it's a pity your skills do not match your ability. Neji didn't generally care much for trash talk during a battle, but this was different for him. He felt a need to prove something ever since his defeat in the forest. He also felt like he wasn't trash talking his opponent as much as he was simply stating a fact. Says the guy who's only dodging, is that all you side branch Hyaga are good for, running from a fight? Never one to question his sensei's directives, Yorawi chose to rile up the Hyaga a little. It's not like it was hard to, all it took was a mention of the side branch. Neji started fuming and seething in rage. He wanted to close up every single tenketsu and then some more in the bastard that dared speak ill of his family. He will pay for his transgressions, and Neji is going to make sure of it. Pay, you say? That voice started speaking again in Neji's head, but this time he was ready for it. He had been warned by Hayate. The restriction seal relied solely on his will to fight it. A Hyaga needs no such power to overcome adversity. Neji's a prodigy, it's his destiny to best Yorawi. Such foolishness. Neji took a deep calming breath to focus his attention again on the task at hand. He felt his rage starting to recede. At the same time, the voice talking to him slowly faded away in the distance. It was after calming down that his Byakugan and its 360-degree view caught sight of the Jounin in the room looking ready for something. He hadn't noticed it, of course, but as soon as the side branch had been bad-mouthed in his presence, rage started taking over him and powering the curse mark he had been bestowed by the treacherous Sunin. It had started to activate, and while it didn't fully take over him this time, it was visible on his face. Now, under the influence of only his thoughts, Neji smirked condescendingly at his opponent and ran toward him. Not expecting to be attacked in such a way after the display the Hyaga had put on, Yorawi was too late to react. He tried to get a hold of Neji, but his arm was instantly targeted by the faster boy. Making short work of him, Neji sealed off the tenketsu on his attacking arm and then went on to punish the other, rendering him incapable of defending himself or attacking for that matter. Niji then placed a hard fist on his right cheek for good measure in what could only be described as a very unHyaga way. Yoroi dropped limp on the floor after that, completely out cold. Winner, Hyaga Niji. Naruto could see how on edge Kakashi had been for the entirety of Niji's match, especially after the seals started appearing on his skin again. It truly was something disturbing to feel. Yes, everyone saw how that seal started extending itself through Niji, but not everyone could feel it. That energy so vile and so disturbing. How was someone capable of that kind of energy, a former disciple of one of the kindest men on earth no less? The Sandaime never talked about Orochimaru with him, and he knew it was because he felt guilty about his departure. He refused to believe anything the Hokage had done was the cause for Orochimaru's actions. Focusing his attention back at the matter at hand, Naruto just now realized he didn't even notice when Kakashi had lifted his headband to reveal his Sharingan eye. Oh, how he wished he could do that too. Alas, it wasn't meant to be, at least not until it was strictly necessary, the Hokage told him. I thought you had dealt with it? Naruto could faintly hear the sound of Hayate calling out Ino and Hinata down to fight in the arena, but didn't really pay much attention. There were other more pressing matters at hand. I did. Kakashi's reply was short and perhaps a little rude. He realized this as he sighed and covered his Sharingan eye again. The curse mark, for all we know, it's impossible to remove. Not even Jiraiya-sama found a way to get rid of it. The seal the Hokage and I placed on Niji keeps it at bay, but it's completely dependent on his will. Naruto nodded his understanding and closed his eye in thought. He could faintly remember reading about such a restraining seal in some of the more advanced material he hasn't yet learned and mastered, even though he couldn't remember what it's called. Not even the legendary Jiraiya had been able to remove the curse mark. That thought made him take the whole ordeal as a challenge. Deciding to think about the curse mark at a later date, he stole a glance at the stoic Niji and sighed. Oh, how he disliked him. Not a single moment when Niji had been nice to him was stored in his memory, and that's because Niji was always rude. In a weird way, Naruto found comfort in knowing that he was rude to everyone. Still, Naruto had always been a kind, compassionate and noble person. He refuses to believe there's not even one redeeming quality about him. Perhaps the way to make Niji tolerable was finding out what made him the way he is now. Worst case scenario, he finds out that Niji is a dick just because, and nothing changes. Winner, Hyaga Hinata. The voice of Hayate calling the match made Naruto focus on reality once again. He had lost the entirety of the match, but judging by how unscathed Hinata seemed, it probably hadn't been all that interesting. Hinata. That's just it. Who would know better about Niji than his own family? Naruto decided then and there that he would approach her about it after the exams were over. Will Abarame Shino and Abumizaku please come down? Called out Hayate, bringing up a name a certain pink-haired Kunoichi was very interested in. Sensei. Sakura had been quietly listening to Kakashi and Naruto talk while she watched the matches, but this was something she needed to ask. That guy Zaku, Niji almost blew up his arm when he was possessed. How is he fine? Kakashi focused his attention on the sound genin and thought hard. He remembered watching such a thing through the monitors in the forest. What he doesn't remember seeing is him getting treatment in the forest, and he was sure no one had given him or his teammates treatment ever since they got into the forest. How did they evade the surveillance systems in the forest? Are both contestants ready? Kakashi saw both genin nod and decided to file away his concerns for a later time. It was best he paid close attention and learned as much as he could from these mysterious individuals. Back in the arena, Shino and Zaku jumped away from each other and stared the other down. Deciding to take action, Zaku started channeling chakra through his unbandaged arm and shot a Zankyuha at Shino, who, much to his surprise, didn't even try to dodge. The jutsu hit full force, and instead of dropping to the ground a bleeding mess like Zaku had hoped, Shino burst into a swarm of bugs that all rushed at Zaku from different directions. He jumped back and performed another Zankyuha to clear out the area. Standing in front of Zaku was Shino, both hands on his pockets, looking his forever but confident stoic visage. "It's best that you give up now. Why? Because my bugs can eat your chakra out if you try to attack me, and I can do the same should you try and attack them." Zaku was indeed surrounded, but he was nowhere near beat. "Don't underestimate me, stupid tree hugger." He removed the bandages covering up his other arm to reveal. There was nothing wrong with it other than a few bruises. In the balcony, Sakura looked even more shocked and turned to look at her sensei, only to find a similar puzzled look on his face. Down at the arena, Zaku smirked as he pointed a hand at each of the sides surrounding him, but much to his surprise or annoyance, Shino still didn't look troubled at all. "I will wipe that stupid look of your face, Zankyakukuha." Channeling almost all of his chakra carelessly into his attack, Zaku smirked, ready to take out Shino in a single blow. Boom! Instead of a powerful gust of cutting wind, both of Zaku's arms exploded in a gory scene that left pieces of broken flesh and puddles of blood all over the floor. Zaku dropped to the ground now with 2 missing limbs and screaming and squirming in agony as Shino made his way over him. This time looking regretful. "I told you to give up." Not waiting for an answer, Shino kicked him in the back of the neck and made him fall unconscious as the medic team made their way to them. Winner, Abarame Shino. Shino walked up the stairs in silence and was met with looks of surprise and shock. Not bothering to acknowledge them, he simply walked past them all and stood next to his team. Hey man, what was that? Had he not been incredibly distracted, Kibo might have berated himself for stuttering. "I had my Kakaicha fill the air vents in his arms, making his arms explode when he used his jutsu. Why? Because the wind didn't have a way out and the pressure was too much for his body." Shino didn't wish for him to suffer that way, but he's a shinobi first and foremost. Throwing a match for the sake of his opponent wasn't smart. He had been given a chance to give up and decided not to take it. Fighting with honor is not the ninja way. The screen started going through names fast, and this time both Naruto and Sakura were paying close attention. "Misumi Tsurugi and Sabaku no Kankuro, make your way down at the arena." Hayate called out, making them both jump off the railing, each sporting a smirk in their faces. "Are both contestants ready?" asked Hayate. Receiving a nod from both genin, he signaled them both to start and jumped away from the field. "A brief warning," Misumi said, looking incredibly smug and confident behind the veil of his. "The moment I use my jutsu, you should give up. Otherwise, you'll die." Kankuro smirked and looked ready to laugh at his bold claim. "Were all tree huggers this overconfident? It is you who should think about giving up when I start using my own jutsu." Kankuro untied the bandage holding the puppet on his back, but was attacked by his opponent before being able to let it go free. Misumi used his elbow to strike at his chest, but was stopped by Kankuro's arm. To the surprise of Kankuro and everyone in the room, Misumi's arm started tying itself around his own while the rest of his body tied itself tightly around every one of his extremities, including his neck. "If you don't give up now, I'll snap your neck." Kankuro didn't answer, and Misumi took it as a sign of his will. He could respect deciding to face death rather than giving up in the middle of a fight, even if it was foolish. "Have it your way." He grabbed his head with force and pulled it, making his neck snap in a loud and sickening crunch. Kankuro's face, now looking directly at Misumi, started decaying and turning into a puppet. The bandaged bundle on the floor unfurled to reveal a perfectly healthy Kankuro controlling the puppet that was now tying its extremities very tightly around Misumi's torso. He moved 2 fingers and the puppet started crushing Misumi's body, who yelled loudly in pain as he loudly gave up. Misumi fell limp on the floor as Hayate re-entered the field. Because Misumi can no longer continue, Kankuro is the winner. He signaled the medic team that took Misumi's unresponsive figure as the Sunagenin made his way back to his team with a smug look on his face. "This exam is full of freaks," Sakura said to her team, looking a little grossed out by the turn of events. It was one thing to see someone losing both arms, but having it be by the courtesy of chakra-eating bugs. What about the crushed guy whose extremities looked like jelly just now? Oh come on Sakura-chan, don't be so hard on yourself Tobia. Naruto's comment earned a snicker from the members of the closed Team 10 and even their own senseis. Naruto. Sakura started making her way toward her teammate menacingly with an arm already stretched to hit him hard. Mama, Sakura-chan, said Kakashi with a playful tone as he intercepted her, pay attention now, beat him up later. He didn't even take his eye out of his book, but Sakura could see the eye smile behind it and decided to let Naruto off the hook for now. Thinking back, she did make a rude comment. The names on the screen started spinning rapidly again, and this time it stopped on 3 different names rather than 2. Will Kinyuta Dosu, Akimichi Koji, and Harano Sakura join me down here? Sakura started sweating and looking nervous. She had worked so hard to get here and finally, she got her desired opportunity to show just how much she grew in the past months, so why did she feel so insecure all of a sudden? Was it because of the special matchup that no one wanted to be a part of, or was it because she didn't think herself capable anymore? Maybe she had been overestimating her own abilities for a while, or maybe she... Sakura-chan. She turned to her left and found the sight of her teammate looking at her with a warm look, a reassuring hand now on her shoulder. You got this, okay? You're super strong and you're the best kunoichi in Konoha Tobia. He said as he smiled and gave her a thumbs up with his free hand. Sakura chuckled a little nervously and took a deep breath to calm down and returned the smile in kind. Thank you, Naruto-kun. She walked to the stairs but stopped right by Naruto and placed a soft, grateful kiss on his cheek before continuing on his way down, not staying long enough to see Naruto blushing furiously and hiding in embarrassment behind Kakashi's amused figure. The girl jumped from the railing and landed softly on the ground, shortly after she was joined by Koji, who looked incredibly nervous and conflicted. I can't fight you Sakura, we're friends. He said with worry in his voice that Sakura could find heartwarming, to a certain extent. Don't give up Koji, you're not doing me a favor by not fighting me. She firmly believed that him refusing to fight her was putting her at a disadvantage. If he refused to face her and give it his all, she might lack the necessary experience further down the line, and that would only end in disaster. Koji didn't look all that convinced but nodded his agreement either way. He had spent enough time with Sakura to know he wouldn't be winning an argument against her. You tree huggers are all a bunch of wimps, said Dosu with a scoff and crossed arms. He wasn't worried about them teaming up on him, he firmly believed they stood no chance against him. This is a special matchup and special rules apply. The winner of this match will be the last one standing, said Hayate, getting the participants' attention before things became heated. It was bound to happen either way, best it happened after he called the match. Hayate asked the participants if they were ready, and after receiving nods of confirmation he once again jumped away and gave start to the match. You should give up what you can. What can a little girl and fatso over here hope to achieve? Dosu asked, somehow managing to look smug and dismissive despite having his face completely covered by bandages. Koji started trembling in fury at being insulted in that way. He hated being made fun of because of his weight. What did you call me? He asked in a menacing tone that was entirely dismissed by Dosu. Is Fatso angry at me because I couldn't sensha? Blinded by rage, Koji used his jutsu and started rolling at the surprised Dosu at high speeds, leaving even Sakura surprised by his quick action. She would be lying if she said she didn't wish to team up with Koji to defeat Dosu before having a duel of their own. Apparently the Akimichi heir didn't think that far. Dosu reacted to the advance and jumped away only for Koji to change directions and keep going after him. Sakura kept yelling at Koji to stop and think things through or come up with some sort of plan, but he either didn't listen or didn't care. She definitely wasn't going to jump in front of him to stop him, so she could only watch as Koji rolled all around the arena. Noticing Koji was starting to slow down, Dosu stayed in place only to sidestep him at the last minute and hit his side with an elbow. Not really feeling the impact, Koji was just about to retaliate when he lost all sense of direction and became extremely dizzy. He dropped the jutsu, making him bigger, but the damage was already done. Dosu did the same thing he had done to Kabuto at the beginning of the written test, and Koji was now on the floor vomiting his soul out his body and unable to stand up. The sound genin grabbed a kunao for good measure and was about to stab him when Sakura stopped him with her own kunao. "Proctor, Koji can't keep on," she said without losing her focus on Dosu. Hayate nodded from a distance and quickly jumped in to retrieve Koji before leaving the arena once again. Sakura was frustrated. Koji had completely dismissed her over a comment about his weight. She understood him better than anyone else, as she was easily irked and thrown of her game with comments about her appearance. She just didn't understand why Asuma hadn't taken care of it the same way Kakashi did for her. How did Kakashi do it? By making fun of absolutely every single thing she hated about her appearance until she had to learn to ignore him, of course. Sakura didn't learn much about Dosu's jutsu other than it required him to use those weird gauntlets that were on both of his arms. They would have to be disposed of. Without missing a beat, Sakura jumped away as far as she could the moment she noticed a slight shift on Dosu's stand, and sure enough, he had tried to use his jutsu again to make her drop. "You seem to be slightly better than your friend. No matter, you still can't win against me." He grabbed a hail of shuriken and threw them at her, hoping to distract her long enough to use his jutsu on her, but, much to his confusion, she stood still and let the shuriken pierce her body. Thinking he had won, Dosu lowered his guard, but that proved to be a fatal mistake when the pierced Sakura burst in a shower of cherry blossoms and the real one hit his forearm with a rock-covered punch, effectively breaking one of his gauntlets. Dosu jumped away and seethed in anger. He didn't know this girl could use genjutsu. He was now in a tight spot. He only had one of his main weapons and had to be constantly on guard and checking for genjutsu. He didn't have much time to think of a strategy because of a hail of shuriken flying towards him. "You annoying bitch." Sakura's strategy was quite simple in her mind: keep your distance as much as possible and only close in for an attack when an opening presents itself. She had already done it once and she only had to do it once more. He hadn't used any jutsu that didn't require the use of his device yet, which led her to believe he was reliant on them to fight effectively. She could use it in her favor. "Can't fight without your toys, big boy." She mocked and got the desired effect in the form of Dosu cussing her out and losing his cool. She threw another hail of shurikens as he jumped away to evade them. He landed far away from her and tried to return her attack, only to find her gone from the arena. Thinking he had been placed under the effect of genjutsu once again, Dosu used the dispelling technique and surely enough, found Sakura running at him with another reinforced punch. This time, however, he was able to react in time and used the same move he had used to incapacitate Koji. Sakura stopped dead on her tracks and dropped to her knees. Dosu smirked behind his bandages, and before the proctor could stop him, he fished a kunao out of her pocket and stabbed her right in the forehead, making all signs of life leave Sakura's eyes. Then she turned into a bunch of rocks. "Doton, Shinju Yozanshu no Jutsu." Kakashi watched in amusement as a pair of hands took hold of Dosu's feet from the ground to pull the genin hard, burying him in the ground with only his head and the arm gauntlet free. Sakura emerged in front of him and looked at him with a smirk. She used a kunao to destroy the device to then place the tip on his forehead. "You lose." Winner, Harano Sakura. After being announced the winner, Sakura did a little victory dance and released Dosu from his underground imprisonment. Oh, how she loves that jutsu. Kakashi had done great to teach it to her for sure. Sakura turned her back on Dosu and started walking back towards her team. She could still hear Dosu cussing her out, but she honestly didn't care much. That's why she didn't notice when an enraged Dosu picked up a kunao and started running at her. "You stupid bitch," he called out, making Sakura turn around to find his attacker's kunao just inches away from her face. She had been too slow to react to his advance, but the exam proctor hadn't been, and Dosu was stopped by his firm grip. You should have learned to accept defeat. It was just then, hearing Hate's icy tone and the lack of coughs between his words, that she noticed the kunao piercing Dosu's neck and dripping blood. Sakura stood incredibly still and started stuttering nonsense. She had seen death before, of course, her teammate had died in front of her, but she had never seen someone being killed in front of her. She didn't even notice Kakashi using a shunshin to bring her back by his and Naruto's side. "Are you alright, Sakura?" "Sensei?" He tried to, why was it being so hard for her now to form a coherent sentence? She was worried she would look like a baby, but she couldn't even say that. Sakura could faintly hear the sound of Hate calling out names in the distance. Tenten had gone to fight that Temari girl from Suna apparently, but she didn't have it in herself to pay attention to the match. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time she thought of what would happen, she would see Dosu's face, she would see how life left his eyes, but the face, it wasn't Dosu. It was him. Someone had been killed in front of her, and she immediately went back to that place again. Sakura was standing on the balcony, but her mind wasn't there. She looked around and all she could see was a bridge covered in fog and her lifeless teammate bleeding out in front of her. And she couldn't do anything. "Sakura, calm down." The voice of his sensei snapped her out of her thoughts as she started to focus on the current time again. She could see Shikamaru going up the stairs and an unconscious Kin being taken to the infirmary. "Shikamaru? Did Tenten finish fighting already?" "Take a deep breath, Sakura." She did as instructed and started taking deep breaths. Slowly her vision started becoming normal again. She could feel her heart rate stabilizing. "A panic attack? Out of nowhere?" "It's alright, Sakura, we'll talk about it later. It's Naruto's turn." Seeing as Sakura's panic attack was over, Naruto walked down the stairs to meet his chosen opponent. "Kiba. This one's going to be easy, Akamaru," he said as he jumped off the railing with as much confidence as one could muster. The aforementioned Akamaru simply barked in agreement and jumped off of Kiba's hoodie, both now standing up in front of Naruto. "PFFF, I can beat you with my eye closed any day, mud." Naruto loves riling people up, especially when it was so easy. The match hadn't even started yet and Kiba was already impatiently wanting to pummel Naruto into the ground. "Kick his ass, Naruto." Naruto and Kiba both looked at the balcony to find Ino cheering for him. Sure, Naruto had become friends with Ino ever since he started hanging out with Team 10 for training, but this was a little unexpected. Clearly it was unexpected even by the members of her own team, if Shikamaru's questioning look was any indication. Ino simply shrugged it off as if it was the most normal of occurrences. "What? He's annoying." That comment earned her a snicker from Naruto and deadly looks from Kiba, who was now seething in anger. Ino was helping Naruto and she didn't even notice. "Are both contestants ready?" Hate was growing tired of these genin bickering with each other. Couldn't they just fight professionally and be done with it? He couldn't really blame Naruto. The boy sensei sure likes to have a chat with his enemies. Kiba and Naruto nodded their approval and Hate quickly started the match. Not long after, he jumped away from the arena. Kiba tossed a red pill to Akamaru which made it turn red and more feral. "Let's end this quickly, Akamaru." With the call of Jijuninpo, Shikyaku no Jutsu, Kiba dropped on all fours as blue chakras started swirling around him. His eyes became slitted, his nails became claws and his fangs grew larger. Akamaru then jumped on top of Kiba's back as he made a half-ram seal and called out, "Jujin Bunshin," making Akamaru turn into a perfect copy of him. The now transformed Akamaru jumped from his back and they both started running at Naruto, who had been studying their movements up until now. Seeing as an attack was imminent, Naruto grabbed both of his staffs and stood in a defensive position. With the left staff in a reverse grip, Kiba and Akamaru jumped in the air with a yell of Gatsuaga. Both started rotating their bodies so far that they became drills and started descending at Naruto. The Uzumaki jumped back to avoid the hit but was met with another coming drill from his left that he just barely managed to dodge by jumping up where he was met with another drill. He quickly performed the cage bunchin and used one of his clones to substitute to a safe spot where he could think of a plan. "What's the matter, Naruto? Too scared to face me so you keep running away?" Oh, how Naruto hated when they tried to rile him up in return, and how he hated the fact that it almost worked, that damn stupid mutt. "I'm going to make sure you can't dodge the next attack." Kiba fished a smoke pellet out of his pouch and threw it on the ground, covering the whole of the arena in smoke and leaving his and Naruto's vision completely obstructed. He didn't need to see Naruto, he just needed to be able to smell him while the Uzumaki couldn't be able to see where the attack would be coming from and dodge. Too bad Kiba didn't know Naruto was a censor. Up in the balcony, Sakura visibly smirked and Kakashi had an amused look on his visible eye. "He just lost the match," he said, shocking the Jounin sensei of Kiba's team, Yoi Kurane, who had come a little closer to him when the match started. "Really? How come you have so little faith in your student Kakashi?" asked Kurane with a curious look on her face. It was good to be realistic, of course, but that seemed a little cruel from him. "My student? Who said anything about Naruto? Kiba just sold the match," he said without taking his eye off from the field. He would have used the Sharingan to have a better view, but the Sharingan isn't really capable of seeing through smoke. Just watching the flow of chakra wasn't worth it in his opinion. Back in the arena, Kiba started his onslaught once again, but much to his surprise, he found he still wasn't being able to hit Naruto despite knowing exactly where he was. The slippery Uzumaki was definitely still capable of dodging the attacks without relying on his sight. Annoying little bastard. Angry at the fact that Naruto was still able to dodge his attacks, Kiba stopped his onslaught once again. About the same time, a gust of wind cleared the smoke, revealing 3 Kibas. "Ha! You're a bigger idiot than I thought if you think I wouldn't be able to recognize Akamaru's scent, moron," Kiba said as he lunged forward to the fake Akamaru and hit him on the face hard, only for his punch to phase through him. "How?" Kiba knew it wasn't a bunchin because he could feel Naruto's scent in it. Suddenly, from the ground emerged 3 Narutos in a triangle formation with their hands already on a bird seal. "I'm sorry, Akamaru, I think you're pretty cool." Not waiting for Kiba to snap out of his confusion and without giving them much time to react, the 3 Narutos extended their hands toward Kiba and called out, "Raiten, Reikoukouen no Jutsu." A beam of lightning shot out of the palms of each Naruto and traveled through the arena too fast for the still shocked Kiba to react. It hit both him and his companion head-on and caused him to shake in their spot in pain. They couldn't even yell because the strong energy current wouldn't let them open their mouths. Not wanting to use more force than it was necessary on fellow shinobi, despite how much Kiba annoyed him, Naruto stopped the jutsu when he knew it was enough to knock him out, making both Kiba and Akamaru drop limp on the floor. "How?" asked a sputtering Kurane. "Naruto is a censor, a good one at that." Kiba gave him the opportunity to prepare his attack with the cover of the smoke. "Not the smartest of moves," answered Kakashi with the nonchalant tone he used to disguise his own pride in his student-turned-little brother. After Hayate called the match and an unconscious Kiba was taken to the medical guard, Naruto climbed the stairs and was met with the cheers of his friends and a questioning look on his teammate's face. "How didn't Kiba notice you were just a regular bunchin?" "Genjutsu," he answered, making the Genjutsu mistress of Konoha, Kiba-sensei, perk up at his comment. "Oh? What exactly did you do to him?" she asked, raising her eyebrows. "It's something Kakashi-sensei taught me, an easy illusion to trick his nose into feeling a scent that isn't really there." He looked at Kakashi, who only gave him an approving nod and went back into his book reading. He was just getting to the interesting part. "I thought you said you didn't like Genjutsu." Sakura rubbed her chin in thought. "He did say that to her." "I said Genjutsu doesn't really fit my style, It takes too much control and concentration out of me, I need more practice to be able to use them effectively. The explanation of how he used it just now was omitted, and it really wasn't necessary. Kiba had provided him with a perfect cover to concentrate for a few moments. After all, he saw an opportunity and he took it. The room settled once more, and the only two genin who still hadn't had a chance to fight were clearly anxious, though for very different reasons. Lee was eager to feel the thrill of battle and prove himself as a capable ninja despite his limitations. He wanted to show everyone that his will to fight greatly overcame the fate imposed to him at birth. He wanted to show everyone that it wasn't necessary to use ninjutsu to be a strong shinobi. Above everything else, he wanted to show him he was worthy of respect. Naruto was sweating bullets. Lee had arguably become his best friend. Sure, Shikamaru, him and Koji had formed a very special bond, and there was nothing he wouldn't do to keep them safe. He respected Shikamaru like no other genin and admired his wits too, but there was something about Lee. Something about the way he drives himself that Naruto has admired ever since they met. His will to never give up. Lee is the strongest genin there is currently in the village, and Naruto has no trouble admitting such a fact. He actually strives to be like him. Sometimes he wonders, just how strong would a person with a determination as strong as Lee, the limitations he had been born with. The idea is both scary and exciting. If only he didn't have to fight him. Naruto knows Lee can take care of himself, but there was something about Gaara that screamed of danger, and he hadn't been able to figure it out. He shouldn't be worrying much about it. Lee is strong. If anyone can beat the shit out of Gaara, is him. Will Rock Lee and Sabaku no Gaara please come down here? Yosh Lee. Guy struck his trademarked nice guy pose and patted Lee's head. It's time for you to show them the power of youth. Yes, Guy sensei. I shall make you proud with the brightness of my youth, said Lee, just as excited and eager to fight. He pocketed the notepad he had been using to write anything his sensei said or anything he saw during the matches that he thought interesting, and jumped off the railing to meet his opponent. I'm sorry I haven't been able to give you blood worthy of you, mother. Wait some more, I'll find someone strong to offer you later. Gaara had a crazed look and a psychotic aura as he said it, and held his head tightly with both hands as if he were in some kind of pain, but whoever this mother he was talking to must have been pleased with his explanation, because he went back to his stoic but menacing demeanor immediately after that. Kakashi sensei, almost whispered Naruto up in the balcony, making sure only his brother could hear him. That guy. His chakras, are awful, and there's two. Why does he have two chakras? What is he? Kakashi took note of Naruto's worried look and focused hard in thought. There was only one thing he could think of that would make someone have two different chakra sources. It was hard to believe that Suna had sent their so-called weapon all the way to Konoha for an exam, but he had learned to trust Naruto's sensing, and so far he hasn't been wrong about anything. The sensei leaned closer to Naruto, whispering a single word so low only he could hear it, and saw his face turn white. He knew very well what that word meant, and he didn't like it. Jinhuriki. Are both contestants ready? The question was asked, and in the arena it was clear they both were. Sakura could see Naruto trembling, yet refused to talk about it when she asked if he was okay. He had never been so scared before, and he knew he wouldn't be this scared if it was him facing Gaara. He was really hoping Lee would be more than strong enough to pummel him into the ground, Jinhuriki or not. At the very least, he was hoping Lee would know when to give up if it came to it. Down in the arena both contestants nodded and the match started. Gaara removed the screw cap of his gourd and it came flying at Lee. He took it as his cue and started running, aiming a fist to Gaara's face to find it connected with a protective wall of sand. When he got closer, sand manipulation jutsu, it will be hard to get through it, he observed as he jumped back. Lee jumped back just enough to avoid a counter-attack before coming to the offensive again. He closed in Gaara's personal space and started throwing punches that would all be stopped by the sand. He started circling Gaara as he attacked, hoping it would be enough to divert his attention, but it proved for naught. The green-clad genin started mixing up his attacks with open palm strikes to the chest, lower kicks, punches and jumping kicks, but nothing seemed to work, so he jumped away. "Is that all? I'm still not entertained, there hasn't been enough blood," Gaara said, going into the offensive. Waves of sand started flying at Lee from multiple angles, who would dodge in a certain direction only to find more sand waiting for him at the spot. Lee jumped and was forced to dive back down immediately to avoid being hit in the air. He rolled as he fell to soften the impact and found sand already coming at him. He quickly jumped back up high enough and landed on the pointed fingers of the statue in the back of the room to think on a strategy. "Take them off, Lee." The strong voice of his sensei filled the air, and he turned to look at the imposing man to find an approving look on his face. "But you said I should only take them off to protect someone very important to me, sensei," he replied, recalling the rules imposed to him by his sensei. "Yes, I did, but this is an exception. Show us all your flames of youth." No more explanation was needed, as Lee started giggling and sat down to remove his leg warmers to reveal a set of weights on each of his legs. Almost everyone started wondering how would removing some weights help his situation. Even Kakashi, who despite using weights in the training of his genin, knows that the speed boost they would get from removing them while good wouldn't be fast enough to overcome Gaara's sand. Not caring about the murmurs, Lee stood up and let both set of weights fall on the ground, making giant craters and lifting up an incredible amount of dust from the ground. Everyone in the room, except for the people who knew about it, had their jaws on the floor as Lee disappeared from view. In the balconies, despite being extremely worried, Naruto couldn't help but smile proudly. Lee re-emerged in front of Gaara, shocking him and everyone with his speed. He punched him in the face and was just barely stopped by the sand. Not wanting to waste his momentum, he disappeared again only to reappear on a different side of the redhead to attempt to hit him. He did this multiple times until he managed to get past the sand and connect a spinning axe kick on his head. Everyone, especially Gaara's teammates and sensei, were surprised that someone had managed to actually hit Gaara. Lee kept going at him and managed to connect another hit, this time in his jaw, and sent him flying. When Gaara stood up once again, his skin started peeling off and turning into sand. "A sand armor? I need to get him away from his sand so I can break it without trouble, perhaps if I send him in the air and hit him repeatedly." The lotus. Having made up his mind, Lee let loose the bandages of his arms and started running at incredibly high speeds around Gaara. Dust started to rise following his steps, and except for a few after images, spotting Lee became nigh on impossible, for those who didn't have access to a dojutsu, of course. The Hyuga present in the room almost instinctively turned on their Byakugan at the same time Kakashi uncovered his own Sharingan eye, neither of them wanting to miss out on what was about to happen. Lee ran inside Gaara's defense and kicked him in the stomach hard enough to send him in the air. Not satisfied, he used his arms to lunge himself up legs first and kept on kicking him multiple times, causing visible cracks to appear in his sand armor. When he deemed them both to be high enough, Lee used the bandages in his arms to tie himself around Gaara as well as restrict his movements, and then started spinning. He and Gaara both started falling to the ground fast, and the redhead was clearly going to hit head first. Omote range. Both genin impacted the floor and a loud crash followed. When the dust that had rose from the impact settled, it revealed a winded Lee panting hard with an unmoving Gaara buried in the ground. Hayate made his way to the zone of the impact to determine if Lee had indeed won, and found the unmoving Gaara breaking down and collapsing into sand. An empty shell. A vile energy that made every hair in Naruto's body rise filled the room, and he started holding onto the rail so hard that his knuckles started turning white. Behind Lee, a maniacal laugh could be heard, followed by Gaara emerging from the sand with a twisted face. "Yes. Your blood will be enough to please mother." Gaara started a new onslaught of sand, much faster and powerful. Lee tried to dodge as much as he could, but was caught in the end and thrown hard into the wall, engraving his figure in it. His face became full of determination as he dug himself out of the wall. immediately jumping away from Gaara. Upon landing, Lee crossed both of his arms and stole a glance from his sensei. To protect and maintain my ninja way. Energy started swirling around his body, and for the first time ever Naruto had been able to feel the gates. For the first time ever Naruto had been able to feel how truly impressive his friend really is. Fourth gate of pain, Showman. Lee's skin turned red as a visible green aura formed itself around him. Not wasting any moment, he ran at Gaara, and the ground started breaking as he went from the sheer power he expelled. An unsuspecting Gaara who had just reformed his sand armor was kicked in the jaw and sent flying in the air. Lee jumped high up and continued his onslaught at speed so high Kakashi could barely perceive with his Sharingan. In the air, Lee started hitting Gaara repeatedly from multiple angles without ever letting him fall. No human can move like this, were the Reedhead's thoughts as his armor was cracked in multiple places and the pain he felt became more unbearable. Lee appeared in front of him and yelled, "This is it." Fifth gate of closing, Tumen, and the energy around him became even more powerful. He looked around and stole a glance at his teammate. "Are you watching, Niji? This is my ace in the hole that I had saved for you." Lee hit Gaara hard in the stomach and sent him crashing to the ground once again. Boom. The impact was so hard everyone could feel the aftershock as a loud crash not very different from an explosion echoed around the room. In the arena, Lee could be found kneeling and barely able to move with a satisfied and accomplished look on his face. "Lee." Lee heard his dear friend call his name but didn't understand the urgency in his voice until he felt it, strings of sand tying themselves around his body. He tried to stand but failed and only managed to give the sand more ground as it tied itself around his arm and lower back. The world slowed down for him. He could faintly see Gaara closing his hand and muttering some jutsu he didn't quite catch. He could faintly see how Naruto completely disregarded the rules and was in the process of jumping off the railing. Then he feel it. Ah. He screamed in agony and fell back on the floor. This time everything around him started moving too fast for him to understand. He knew he was being held by someone. He guessed it was probably Naruto if the faint hint of orange he could see was anything to go by. In front of him stood an imposing figure that had clearly stopped the advance of the sand and was dressed in similar clothing to him. It must have been his reliable sensei. Everything had become hazy for him and he was just barely conscious. The only thing keeping him awake was a single thought that wouldn't leave his mind. "I can't feel my legs." Chapter 10. The fights are as follows. The sudden and intimidating voice of Ibiki brought Naruto out of his intense glaring to a certain redhead. In the first match, Nara Shikamaru will fight Uzumaki Naruto. In the second match, Harano Sakura will fight Sabaku no Tamari. In the third match, Sabaku no Kankuro will fight Abarame Shino, and finally in the fourth match, Hyaga Niji will fight Hyaga Hinata. "You're forgetting my name." Gaara's voice was menacing, full of hatred and bloodlust, but Ibiki wasn't fazed in the slightest. "Because there's an odd number of participants, you Sabaku no Gaara will be facing the winner of the first match. Win or lose, the progress of your opponent in the tournament will be decided by their match only." After he said that, Ibiki didn't take any questions and dismissed the genin. Naruto was mad. He can't remember ever being this angry, and perhaps that's why he did what he did. After the match announcements had been made, he walked up to Gaara and stated, "I will destroy you." He then walked away, only stopping in the place where Lee had laid before being taken to the hospital to receive far better treatment than what he could hope to get in the tower's infirmary. Naruto looked at the still fresh blood of his friend and knelt. He took it on the palm of his hand and squashed it hard as he made an oath. "I will make sure he pays for what he did to you." Bushy brows. "I swear I will." "Naruto-kun." A stern and concerned voice called out his name, and it was only then he was finally brought out of his own thoughts. He looked around and found that Lee was still asleep in the hospital room he himself had refused to leave for the past 2 days. The only person who would ever come to visit Lee besides him was Gazenzai, and that only made him feel a stronger need to stay by his side. "I'm sorry, Dr. Teruya, I spaced out a little to be a. He rubbed his nose sheepishly in that silly way he always does when he's apologetic about something. It didn't really feel natural this time, not with his friend lying in bed right beside him. Dr. Teruya chuckled at Naruto's antics and waved off his apology as she made her way to him and took a seat right by his side. "So, how are you feeling, dear?" "Me? You want to know how I'm feeling?" That seemed like such a dumb question to him. Why was he suddenly the object of her concerns when he isn't even her patient? "What about Lee?" Now. Don't get all judgmental on me, young man. Lee is doing as well as he can given his circumstances. I just wanted to know how you're feeling, that's all." She gave him a look that dared him to say otherwise and that seemed to stir up something in his mind as he slumped his shoulders. "I'm sorry." Naruto was never rude, at least not intentionally. He had been a little testy after the prelims were over. Perhaps it was the lack of sleep, but at this point he was merely guessing. "Don't be, now tell me, what's got you so upset?" she asked. "It's just that I feel like I should have done something for him. Kakashi says there's nothing I could have possibly done to prevent what happened, but I still can't shake the feeling that I failed Lee. It was most likely because he knew. He knew Gaara was dangerous and never warned him. He knew what Gaara was even if just shortly before his match, but he still didn't tell him. It ate at him. Well, I'm not Lee, though I'm sure you noticed, but if it were me, I wouldn't even think of you when looking for someone to blame. If anything, I think Lee is really fortunate to have such a good and loyal friend." Kaya's comment made Naruto brighten up a little and she pinched his cheek like a grandma would do her grandson, making Naruto chuckle and visibly relax. "There's actually something else I've been meaning to talk to you about, Naruto." As she spoke, she looked around the room, and even though it was empty, she knew the walls had ears. "Come with me, I would like to discuss this with you in my office." The old woman led Naruto away from Lee's resting room and into her own secluded office in a not-so-accessible part of the hospital. The office was at the end of a corner with only one way in and out that could be watched from the inside at all times. When reaching the office, Kaya fished a weird-looking key from her pouches and allowed Naruto in, making sure to lock the door again after he had taken a seat. Naruto looked a little nervous as Dr. Teruya's wrinkled visage was taken over by a serious look he had only seen once before. The woman stood in front of him and activated a silencing seal under her desk that he knew to be the work of the Hokage himself. "So, what's this all about, Dr. Teruya?" he asked as he nervously shifted his feet. "Oh." The woman lost her serious look and started chuckling at Naruto's expense, making his eyebrows twitch in irritation. "Are you that scared of me, Naruto-kun? I must say I don't know if that's a good thing or not." She got what she wanted in the form of Naruto, visibly relaxing. She was thinking hard the whole time and didn't realize her look was unnerving. "There is something I would like to talk to you about, propose even." Naruto replied by giving her a questioning look. "Months ago I mentioned to Kakashi that I was interested in coming up with a way for you to use your Sharingan like a regular eye, as in making you capable of turning it on and off at your leisure," she explained. "Just me? Why not him too?" he asked and caused her to smile in pride. It truly was refreshing to see someone as selfless and concerned for others as Naruto. "I don't know how much you know about the incident that resulted in Kakashi getting his Sharingan, but, unlike you, he was forced to use it right after he got it and it caused some serious damage. I'm not saying it's impossible, just way beyond what I'm capable of." She had been the one to give Kakashi a thorough examination when he returned from that mission. The damage Kakashi's eye socket had received when he lost his own eye had been bad enough, top that with the stress using the Sharingan right away put on him, and well, it wasn't pretty. "How would that even work? You do your glowing hand thingy on me and that's it?" he asked, rubbing his chin. "You really need to learn a little about medical ninjutsu, Naruto-kun." she said as she giggled at Naruto's question before continuing her explanation. But to answer your question, no, it would technically be a minor surgical procedure. I'd go in and rearrange the nerve terminations in your eye and do some work on the chakra pathways that lead to it. If it all goes well, the Sharingan will recede back into the natural form of Sasuke-kun's black eye. Oh. Yeah. Naruto didn't think about that. He wasn't against the idea of having two different eye colors or anything, but having used the Sharingan as little as he can, sometimes he forgets it's even there. Looking at Sasuke's black eye every single day, a daily reminder of the fact that Sasuke isn't there anymore. He doesn't know if he's ready for that. I know what you're thinking, dear. I might not have known little Sasuke much, but I am sure he would appreciate you taking him with him wherever you might go, and not only for fights. I'll become your eye, and see the future with you. Yeah. I think he would, Tabia. Naruto discreetly wiped a lone tear away from his face and went back into business mode. How long would that take though? I kinda have to train to beat the crap out of Gaara, you know. Well, the procedure itself shouldn't take me more than a few hours. Normally, a person would need at least a month to recover from such a thing. You'll be good to go in a week, she said as she playfully ruffled his hair. Oh, how she wished she could recover as fast as he did. Is it okay if I talk to Nii-san about it first? Of course, dear. Come back tomorrow if you decide you do want it. I think you should do it. What? Just like that? At least think about it, Tabia. Naruto crossed his arms and huffed in annoyance, making Kakashi chuckle. It's a rare opportunity, and definitely worth it. Besides, a week is not too long. You'd still have 3 whole weeks to train for your match with Shikamaru and Gaara, said Kakashi, closing his book and putting it back in his pocket. I guess you're right. I'm just nervous, you know. I haven't been able to use my eye in public for a while now. It was still very exciting for him. There was something about wearing his headband on his forehead like a proud shinobi that he had always found appealing. Now that he won't have to cover his eye with his hair, he can wear it like he used to. Well, officially you lost it. I wouldn't go around showing off an eye you're not supposed to have, Sharingan or not. Now that made Naruto feel dumb. It's actually great timing. I was going to ask you to tell Sakura that I won't be able to train you guys for about a week. Naruto asked Kakashi. What? Why? So they sent their Jinchuriki to the village. That is troubling. Hiruzen's chin was resting in both of his hands as he sat on his desk and thought hard about what he had been informed by Kakashi about a certain redhead. How would you feel about taking Inu's mask for a little trip, Kakashi? He asked suddenly, rejoicing in the look of shock he had gotten out of his most aloof shinobi. A Black Ops mission? He asked. I've been hearing rumors about Suna's discontent. It is no secret that the Wind Daimyo has cut funding from them and given many of their assignments to other hidden villages, especially ours. The game of politics in the 5 great nations has always been shaky at best. Recently the Wind Daimyo had randomly decided that he preferred to have less and less dealings with his own hidden village for some reason. Tensions had begun to rise in both nations, mostly because the Wind Daimyo had decided Konoha was his best choice when it came to missions, giving Tsunagaku only the more mundane of tasks. You could argue that Konoha could simply refuse him, but it wasn't as easy as that. Outright denying your services to an allied nation was simply not in the realm of possibility. The Hokage had still made it a point of finding ways to reject as many missions as possible in hopes of maintaining their friendship with Suna. Suna openly boasts of their Jinchuriki as a weapon, and I want to know why they sent him here. I want you to do a little spying, find out if this is them just sending a genin to be promoted or a statement. Kakashi of course accepted the assignment without so much as a second thought and made his way to meet Naruto at his house at the boy's request. Kakashi was excited at the prospect of wearing his Umbu mask after so long. He also felt a little trepidation, but that went unsaid. Hokage-sama gave me a special assignment that he would like completed as soon as possible. A special assignment? What does that even mean? Naruto looked up at his sensei, crooking his head to the side. Don't worry about it, I'll be back in time to help you both train. Sakura was picking up the belongings that she had in Naruto's house. Is there anything else you need, Naruto-kun? The procedure had gone pretty well, and Dr. Teruya sent Naruto home to rest with a bag full of a high-dosage numbing medicine that had a drowsiness effect. Not as high as Naruto was when he woke up though. Sakura, being the amazing friend she was, had gladly taken Naruto back to his house and watched over him so he didn't do anything stupid. The drugs were completely out of his system by now and no longer needed anyone to watch over him. I'm alright now, Sakura-chan, but thanks for taking care of me, I really appreciate it, you know. He said as he helped Sakura store the rest of her things before escorting her to the door. Remember, Dr. Teruya told you not to remove your patch until the week is over, don't try to use your eye either. Sakura stopped and added. If anyone asks what happened to your eye, tell them your wound got infected. As she walked away from him again. Wait. Naruto tripped on his doorstep as he clumsily grabbed Sakura's arm to stop her. Do you know if they checked Lee while I was out? He knew Lee was supposed to receive a thorough examination by Dr. Teruya to assess the damage when she deemed him stable enough. Yeah. About that. A sad look made its way in Sakura's features and Naruto could feel his stomach gripping at the defeated look on her face. Apparently the damage done to his spine was too severe. Lee will never walk again, I'm sorry, Naruto. She left shortly after that, but he didn't notice. He sulked in his living room for hours and wallowed in guilt. Kaya's words rang deep in his brain. His own common sense was telling him there was no point in blaming himself for what happened to Lee, but he still did. What would his parents do if they were in his situation? That's the question he kept asking himself over and over whenever he found himself at an impasse ever since he discovered his parents' identity. Would the legendary Yondaime Hokage wallow in guilt and self-pity over things he had no control over? What about the feared hot-blooded habanero? Naruto smiled lightly to himself and stood up. He wasn't told he couldn't go out of his house and he needed to relax a lot before he could face Lee. Perhaps a little trip to the local onsen was due. Oh yes, move around a little, beauty. A man with long white hair tied in a ponytail was giggling and doing a little perverted dance as he spied inside the woman's side of the bath through a peephole. Who even does that? Oi, old man. You can't do that, Tobia. This wasn't Naruto's version of a relaxing time. Sure, he could definitely appreciate the beauty of the female body, but he would never fall so low as to violate their privacy. Well, perhaps if it was Sakura in that onsen he would maybe consider it. Get lost, brat. I'm doing very important research, replied the man without even taking his eye away from his spying spot, making Naruto get even more annoyed. He wasn't having a good day and this stupid old man wasn't being helpful. Naruto tried to get him away from the bath a few more times, but it was all to no avail. He had to give it to him. For all his antics, the man truly was strong. No matter how hard he pushed, he never moved. Not even a single inch. Fine. Oh, never one to be beaten so easily, Naruto went with plan B. He went inside of the bathhouse reception and used his own Warik no Jutsu to turn into a female version of himself with two long blonde ponytails and a significant bust. He then picked a towel from the desk to cover his face and ran to the women enjoying their bath time, yelling, "Pervert! There's a pervert spying on the wall." Every lady heard the fear in Naruto's voice and immediately dressed up to deal with the situation. Outside of the onsen, the screams of agony and "don't kick poor little me" were music to his ears. This wasn't what he intended to do to relax, but it definitely worked. He might play a few more pranks again. Having had enough, Naruto went to look for the man just to make sure he was still alive, so he could keep making fun of him, and found him sitting down in a tree as he rubbed a spot on his head. Got a little beat up, pervert. he asked mockingly, earning a glare from the man that quickly turned into a look of recognition. It didn't last long enough for Naruto to notice, but he had been identified, so the man saw it fit to introduce himself. "You interrupted very important research, you damn brat," he said as he fished out a book from his pouch and proudly displayed the cover, making Naruto realize just what book it was. "It's you. You write those perverted books Kakashi and I reads all the time," Naruto yelled as he pointed an accusatory finger at the man and stomped his feet in indignation. He truly didn't mind all that much, but Sakura did, and she complained loudly about it whenever she could. The man only smirked as a response and performed a sing-less jutsu that made a cloud of smoke. It dissipated and revealed him standing on top of a human-sized red toad in a ridiculous pose. "Man, cower at my presence and ladies swoon all over me. It is I, the great toad sage of Mount Myaboku, Jiraiya the gallant." "Jiraiya?" asked Naruto with a slight tremble in his voice that caught both him and the legendary Sunin off guard. "Yes," was the slightly nervous reply. "Jiraiya the Sunin?" he asked again, this time with a more serious look on his face. "Yes," was the short and boastless reply. Naruto looked at the ground. In a quiet voice he said, "You trained my father." Jiraiya sighed and let the toad go back to where it came from. He knew of course that Naruto had been told about his father's identity the last time he was in the village. Heck, he had been told he could approach the boy if he wanted to, but never got around to it. A little part of him was just hoping that knowing about his father wouldn't mean he knew anything about him. That was of course wishful thinking. How would a boy who idolized the yondaime long before he even knew they were related not know everything there is to know about him? "Listen, Naruto." The words came out, but he was still unsure of what it was that he wanted to say. What was he supposed to say? At least he got the desired effect of getting his attention. "You know my name." Naruto knew from Kakashi's stories that Jiraiya and his father were really close, but judging by the lack of contact between them he had guessed long ago that the closeness probably didn't extend to him. He used to be bitter about it but let it go eventually. You can't force people to care about you. In the end, no matter how lonely it got in that apartment, he always had someone he could go to. "I know a lot about you, even what you hide behind that little patch of yours." The world seemed to stop for a second as Jiraiya's comment made Naruto gape like fish. For a moment he didn't know if he was supposed to know or if he could even trust that man. It was a scary thought. "Would you like something to eat, brat?" "My treat. I'm sure you have some questions." Naruto silently accepted the invitation and led Jiraiya to his favorite restaurant in the village, Ichiraku Ramen. Ever since he was a little kid he felt attracted to the place. The energy inside was always so different from that of the entire village. He never knew how to explain it, but being there felt right. For some reason he always felt like he belonged there. The amazing people that ran the stand were obviously a big plus. They both settled in and ordered some food. Jiraiya discreetly placed a foot on the ground and erected a little silencing barrier to keep whatever they talked about between themselves. Having realized what the man had done, Naruto relaxed a little and spoke up. "Do you dash? Am I? Do I dash?" Jiraiya allowed himself to chuckle at the boy's troubles and smiled fondly. This wasn't what he had been expecting of their first meeting. In some part of his mind he had been convinced that maybe Naruto would see him riding a toad and immediately decide he was the most awesome ninja ever and would pester him for training restlessly until he bulged as if he wasn't thinking of training him either way. "Do you hate me?" The question was asked in a voice so weak that it didn't sound like it belonged to a boy that earlier had such a confident aura around him. It's easy to forget that the boy had grown up with only a single person he could call a family. Naruto, for all his confidence, was just a scarred boy who had to grow up in a lonely apartment looking every night at the ceiling, crying. Asking himself just what it is that he could have done to make his family leave him behind. He had found out the truth eventually, but a lot of damage had already been done. Why would you ask that, Naruto? Asked Jiraiya in a voice that conveyed nothing, not a trace of anger, sadness, or regret. Nii-san said you and my father were very close, so I thought that maybe you would. I don't know. But he did know, he just didn't want to say that he hoped the man would have made himself present, that he hoped Jiraiya would have been there for him so he wouldn't have been as lonely as he was. It didn't really matter now, that's what he thought at least. Hiruzen had been family for him when he needed it the most, and now, he has friends, he has a brother. He has people he cares about now. You thought that I would have been there for you. Jiraiya took a sip from a cup of sake he had gotten out of nowhere before continuing. It's not because of you, Naruto. At the time I was very troubled myself, I focused solely on my work and thought you'd be alright. By the time I realized I was wrong, you didn't need me anymore, so I stayed away. He took another sip of his drink and stared at the counter as his mind wandered. He could remember Minato asking him for permission to name his soon-to-be-born son after the main character of his first and unsuccessful book. I kept tabs on you from a distance, I know all about your exploits in the pranking department, your graduation, all about your Sharingan and what happened to you in Nami. I'm sorry for your loss. He said sincerely and got a smile out of Naruto. Thanks. Naruto said as he slurped some noodles before continuing. Were you the one who gave me Gama-chan? He asked as he fished a cute frog wallet out of his pouch and showed it to him. Hiruzen had told him when he gave that to him that a dear friend of his mother had sent it as a gift. At the time he didn't know about his father, but it made a lot of sense now. Jiraiya for his part released a heartfelt laugh and took the wallet from him and stared at it fondly. I can't believe you still have this after all these years. He gave it back and looked at Naruto before continuing. If you're still mad at me, I will completely understand. I just want you to know that nothing I did was your fault, nor was I trying to hurt you in any way, okay? You know. Naruto said as he stored Gama-chan away. There was a time when I would have been really angry at you, but I don't see the point anymore. I have Naizen now and Jiji was always there for me. I'm really lucky. There really is nothing to be mad about, Tobia. A wave of relief came over Jiraiya as he released a breath he didn't know he had been holding. What do you say if I help you train a little while Kakashi comes back? Think of it as payback. I can't really train this week, but there is something you can help me with, said Naruto in a cryptic tone that spiked Jiraiya's curiosity. You're the only Fuinjutsu master in the village, right? He asked and received a nod from the curious man in response. How would you go about fighting a Jinchuriki? A week later. I have interesting news, Hokage-sama. The Hokage looked at the arriving Kakashi and nodded so he could continue with his report. Suna's forces seem on edge, they appear to be preparing for something. Were you able to find anything more? Asked Hiruzen, making Kakashi shake his head. I'm afraid not, they are actively making an effort to hide their activities. I think you would also like to know that I couldn't find the Kaze cage while I was there, replied Kakashi. You couldn't find Raza? That is correct. Kakashi nodded. I searched the whole place more than once and I'm certain he wasn't in the village. Kakashi had been looking for him ever since he entered their territory. It might have been risky for him to actively search someone as powerful as a Kage, but you don't become a legendary Umbu captain without learning how to properly hide yourself. His original plan was quite simple: get as much information as he could from the man that would hold more knowledge of the village's activities than anyone else. It was a real pity that Raza was nowhere to be found. I can't help but feel like this is all connected somehow. Hiruzen spoke suddenly, getting Kakashi's attention back. I can't accuse Suna of anything without evidence. I'll have Umbu reinforce the surveillance on the village. If anything, it'll make whatever they're planning harder to accomplish. Keep your ears on the ground, Kakashi. If that is all, Hokage-sama, I will go and meet my team now. A whole week had passed and that gave Kakashi a lot of time to think about his team's training. Sakura could definitely use some more strong Doton Jutsu to get past Tamari's Wind Jutsu. Naruto on the other hand. There's only one thing he could think of that would be powerful enough to get past Gaara's perfect defense. He wasn't really worried about it. After careful consideration he realized, if there is someone that he could completely trust to learn such a technique, it's Naruto. Oh yes. Naruto-kun has been hanging out with Jiraiya this week. Apparently he finally decided it was time to introduce himself. Hiruzen chuckled remembering his students' retelling of the events that led to their first meeting. Only Naruto would be able to make someone get beat up by a group of angry women and then bond over some ramen. Kakashi simply smiled fondly and vanished in a swirl of leaves as he went to his apartment to ditch the Umbu equipment. Shortly after Kakashi left, Hiruzen decided to keep on working on the paperwork he had left to do for the day, but an unexpected visitor made his way to his office with a look of uncertainty in his face. Definitely more emotion than usual. "Hayashi, to what do I owe the pleasure?" asked Hiruzen as he put his pipe down on his desk. "Hokage-sama. I would like you to lend me your assistance with some very important matters. Earlier that day. We must deal with that child before he becomes a problem, Hayashi," demanded an elderly man that had seen it fit to come crashing into Hyuga Hayashi's office along with some of the elders from the Hyuga's main branch. It had been going on ever since Niji had returned to the Hyuga estate after being marked by Orochimaru, and it truly was annoying him to no end. They claimed Niji had been compromised and shouldn't be allowed to roam free with a seal no one knew how to remove, and that they should make sure the clan's integrity was protected. By dealing with him before he becomes a problem, they meant they wanted to activate Niji's caged bird seal and kill him, of course. The way they kept on talking to him about it like it was such an obvious solution made his blood boil every time. Hayashi wasn't a saint by any means. He had his fair share of blood and mistakes on his hands, but he would never let anything happen to his brother's beloved son. He had watched the boy grow up full of hatred and resentment for the main branch, but never did anything about it because he had thought he deserved that much. He never stopped to think that all that hatred was eating him inside. He even kept a letter from the boy's father just so he could have it as a keepsake from his brother. Only after Niji had been targeted by Orochimaru did he realize how selfish he had been all these years. "You would do well to remember who you're talking to. Don't think for a second that your position as an elder means anything to me. If you dare to speak to me in that tone ever again, you won't live to regret it." The temperature in the room dropped and the uninvited guests found themselves cowering at Hayashi's imposing figure and the murdering look in his face accentuated by his activated Byakugan. "Leave this place immediately." The elders hurriedly left and Hayashi slumped back in his chair as he sighed dramatically. He was a cold man, but he wasn't emotionless. These people's constant vouching for activating Niji's seal was starting to take a toll on his mind, and he felt exhausted. So exhausted. Present time. "I won't be able to shield him forever. I have no doubt that eventually someone will go behind my back and activate his seal without my consent." He scoffed as he explained the situation to the Hokage, the tone he used so flat it almost appeared like he was flippant about the situation. "How can I face my brother if I let his son die?" But he wasn't. "What do you need from me, Hayashi?" The way the Hokage worded his question didn't sit right with him, evident by the way his face suddenly screwed up. He almost made it sound like he was doing him a favor. His features became smooth like is becoming of a Hyuga shortly after, as he begrudgingly realized one very important fact. He was asking for a favor. All main branch members have the knowledge to activate the seal, and there are some that would ignore my orders to protect their interests, but... He looked at Hiruzen and a little smug smile appeared on his face. "No one would be stupid enough to go against the Hokage. If Niji is put under the village's protection, they would have no other choice but to stop pestering me with their idiotic ideas." It seemed reasonable enough for Hiruzen and something he was going to do anyway, he was actually already waiting on his secretary to send a letter to the Hyuga clan. Head. This just made things a little easier for him. Very well then, your request is approved. My secretary will be waiting for you with a written statement you can show to your clansmen if you wish. Hayashi gave a small bow and left the office to retrieve the paper from the legendary man's secretary. As he left, all he could think of was his late brother and how much he had failed him after everything he sacrificed for him, including his life. So, what are we training in, sensei? Sakura had been very excited when she was asked to meet the recently returned Kakashi in their training grounds. She still couldn't believe that she had made it to the finals and was very excited at the idea of getting some training in. Well, my cute little genin, I've been thinking and decided that I will only train you for your first matches. Kakashi's comment earned him a look of confusion from Naruto and a look of understanding from Sakura. It's because we're facing each other, she said. That is correct. I have no doubt that as he is, Naruto can easily beat Shikamaru, so I will help him train to defeat Gaara and I will help you Sakura to defeat Temari. You can find something to train yourselves in for your match, he said as he fished a scroll out of his pouch and tossed it to Sakura. I believe the best course for you is to make your Doton Jutsu stronger. Teaching you more jutsu won't help you right now, so we'll use this 3 weeks for you to complete the second step of mastering your nature transformation, as well as constant taijutsu training. I smiled and made a cage bunshin that took Sakura with him to a couple of big rocks that were in the middle of the clearing. He could explain the exercise himself, but he knew by now that Sakura learned best reading. He would only make sure to provide assistance when needed. Without speaking a word, he placed a hand on Naruto and used a shunshin to take him back to a completely different clearing where Jiraiya was already waiting for them. Jiraiya-sama and I have been talking about your training and I think you should keep working on mastering that special Fuinjutsu for Gaara, so I will be teaching you your plan B. Kakashi's tone became serious and the air around the clearing became so heavy Naruto found it hard to make a joke. He had grown used to Jiraiya's antics and usual perverted nature. He had even begun to call him Erosanin for that same reason, but he knew there was a big difference between the pervert and the Sunin. Seeing a serious look on Jiraiya's face was very unnerving. I will teach you a jutsu that only you can learn, Naruto, but I want you to promise me something. Promise me that you won't ever use it on a comrade and will only use it when it is strictly necessary. Naruto knew by now that this facet of Kakashi meant they weren't playing games. Why? Because this is an assassination jutsu I created myself. Just then Naruto realized exactly what they were talking about and it scared him a little, even if the fact that Kakashi would trust him with such a thing was a very rewarding feeling. But, how can I work on my Fuinjutsu at the same time? He asked and made Jiraiya smirk. I know you've been using Kage Bunshin to study Fuinjutsu with Sarutobi sensei, we'll be doing the same. A couple of clones will work with me on that while the real you works with Kakashi, he said and started to rub his chin as if he forgot to say something. Oh right. Don't be scared of using it here. This whole clearing has more barriers and detecting seals I can count. No one but us will be able to watch you here. That made Naruto smirk as he took his hitate from his neck and tied around his forehead where he had always felt it should be. With the hair covering his right eyes now clear, he opened them both to reveal a beautiful azure orb along with an imposing onyx one. He channeled a little chakra to it and the black eye started spinning as it became a glowing red with 2 black tomo. A single thought made its way to the mind of both men at the young Uzumaki's display. Show off. A week before the finals. Thanks for coming, Hinata, said Naruto as he led the recently arrived Hinata to a stool next to him at Ichiraku's. I was going to ask you to meet me after the prelims were over, but with everything that happened I guess I just forgot, you know. Hinata nodded, but she wasn't really listening. She thanked whatever god was watching over her right now that Naruto was way too oblivious to notice her blushing madly. She still couldn't believe Naruto had asked her out. When she dreams about this moment she always figures she will one day confront Naruto about her feelings and leave him so impressed by her boldness that he would have no other option but to return them in kind. This was good enough. I'm sorry I asked you to come here all of a sudden, it's just that I've been thinking about this a lot, you know. She was now on the brink of hyperventilating, her dreams were going to come true. I want to ask you something very important and I don't want you to feel forced to answer me or anything. How could he even think she would feel forced by him when this is exactly what she has always wanted? So I really hope you don't mind me asking about this and I really hope I won't make you uncomfortable with this, Tobia. I wanted to ask you. Okami, 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 this was it, Naruto was finally going to ask her the question she has been wanting to hear for ages now. It was taking every bit of strength in her body to not pass out. I wanted to ask you if... Yes. I wanted to ask you if you could talk to me about Niji. Yes, Naruto-kun. I want to talk to you about Eni. Huh. Was all she managed to say before passing out in embarrassment. Of course Naruto wouldn't really be interested about her, why would anyone be interested about her at all? After Naruto managed to wake Hinata up with the help of Ayame and Hinata apologized for every reason possible, they finally got around to actually speaking. Why do you want to know about Niji Nii-san, Naruto-kun? She stuttered timidly without moving her gaze away from the now cold bowl of ramen he had gotten for her. I feel like I'm greatly overstepping but I just can't help it, I just wanted to know why Niji is the way he is. He answered with complete honesty. Hinata sighed and wondered if this is something she should be telling him or anyone else for that matter, but decided that she probably could tell some of the story. It's not Niji Nii-san's fault, he has gone through a lot. I've seen the way he is for months now. He treats me with some very little amount of respect, but the way he treats Lee and you, especially you, is just... What can make him hate you so much? He couldn't fathom the idea of good old Hinata doing something that could earn her the glares, the comments, the degrading, the hate she receives from him. His father died because of me, was her short reply that almost made her burst into tears. Naruto couldn't believe what she was saying and goaded the story out of her, or at least as much of it as he could. When Hinata was just 4 years old, a Kyumo ninja that had come to the village along with a diplomatic party had tried to abduct her in the middle of the night. Her father had noticed and pursued, saving her by cruelly killing the kidnapper. Kyumagakure denied the events that transpired and wrongfully blamed the village of killing a diplomat. At the time Konoha was still recovering from the Kyuubi's devastating blow on their forces and couldn't afford to go into another war, so they complied with Kyumo's ridiculous demands and turned over the man who had brutally killed their shinobi to them. Except it wasn't the man who killed their shinobi. Konoha figured out that Kyumo was after one of their powerful Kekii Genkais and had orchestrated the whole thing to get their hands on the Byakugan one way or the other, so the Hyuga sacrificed her father's twin brother, who bared the mark of a side branch Hyuga, when he died. The Byakugan disappeared and all Kyumo got was a corpse they could gain nothing from. That event marked Niji forever. Hinata claims he used to be the most sweet and caring child there was, but the death of his father and his consequent marking had been enough to turn his life around. He grew resentful to the village that had caused the whole mess. Resentful to the main branch that treated their kin as slaves, resentful to the girl he saw as the cause of all his problems. And resent can easily turn into hatred. He convinced himself that it was his fate to bear the destiny of a slave and that nothing could be done about it, no one could go against fate. It was all because she had been too weak, she was always weak. It wasn't your fault, Hinata, you were just a kid being kidnapped by a big ninja, he said as he put a comforting hand on her shoulder. I don't think you're weak, Hinata, if anything, you're super strong, Tobia. I am strong, she asked with a voice so full of doubt it made Naruto wonder why would anyone hurt someone as kind as her so much. You've been carrying a burden that doesn't belong to you for years now? Of course you're strong, you just have to believe you are. He took one last slurp of his sixth ramen bowl and stood from the corner. You know, I don't think Niji is a lost cause yet. You don't? It shouldn't be that surprising for her. After watching Naruto for years, it was obvious that the boy was full of compassion. But there's only one person who can help him, he said in a matter-of-fact tone. Who is that, Naruto-kun? It's you, Hinata, it's always been you. Naruto paid for both of their meals and left the stand, allowing Hinata to think about what this all meant. It was funny, really. She had always wanted to hear those exact words from him, and now she finally got them, even if it wasn't in her desired way. One thing was clear, Naruto believed she could help Niji, so she would at the very least try. They were going to fight in the tournament either way. Hopefully she will be able to last long enough against him to make it worth it. The idea of winning never even crossed her mind, but she would ask her father to train her harder than ever for the rest of the month. For Niji. 3 days before the finals. Ero Sennin says I'm doing good with the things he's teaching me. He even says he's going to teach me something very special tomorrow. Naruto was retelling his day of training to Kakashi as if he hadn't also been there for the day as they walked to Naruto's apartment. Kakashi was incredibly satisfied with Naruto for his incredible progress in learning his jutsu. Having him train his affinity for lightning from the very start clearly had been an excellent choice. He didn't know much about what went over with Jiraiya in his Fuinjutsu training. The Naruto clones and him work separately so they would be able to concentrate away from the more loud nature of the jutsu Kakashi had been teaching him. He had made it. After weeks of non-stop effort, Naruto had made it, and he decided to treat him for a meal in celebration. He only wished Sakura had been able to join them. The girl of Team 7 had made steady progress. She managed to complete the second stage of her nature transformation faster than Kakashi had anticipated and had made good progress in a very short span. Her Doton Jutsu had become more powerful and her Taijutsu had greatly improved over his guidance. It came off as a surprise to him that she didn't want to train her Genjutsu, but it made sense. She decided to develop more as a heavy hitter, and he wouldn't blame her for choosing to go that way. Sakura hits hard. How is your other training going? Kakashi asked in a suggestive tone that Naruto understood all too quickly. It's going well, I guess. I have to rely on a lot of guessing to figure out some stuff, you know? It'd be easier if I had someone to teach me. But there was no one. Naruto was, as far as anyone knew, the last of the Uzumaki. Kakashi was convinced that there were more, hiding, but they clearly didn't wish to be found, and he could respect that. Nothing guarantees that they would share Naruto's Kekkei Genkai either way. It's hard, but I know I can make it. I will never give dash. He stopped mid-sentence and turned his gaze to a direction different from the one they were going in. His stance became different and the look on his face immediately put Kakashi on edge. He was just about to ask him what was wrong when Naruto spoke up. Someone's dying over there. I think I've felt their chakra before, he said worriedly. Kakashi put a reassuring hand on his shoulder and told him to lead them there. Naruto released his weights and rushed at speeds far surpassing that of a regular genin, definitely not enough to outrun Kakashi, but still pretty damn fast. As they both ran and jumped on rooftops, Kakashi couldn't help but feel a pinch of sadness wash over him. Naruto, knowing what a dying person feels like, is still in his mind his greatest failure. He only wished he could have done something back then. They finally landed on a rooftop and found a bleeding Gecko Hate laying there, barely moving anymore. It's the proctor, yelled Naruto with clear distraught in his voice. Kakashi dropped next to him and started using Iryo ninjutsu on him. He still wasn't by any means a medic, and all he knew about medicine was very rustic still, but he trusts he should be able to keep him alive long enough for someone who knows what they're doing to help him. Sasuke wasn't that lucky. It's not safe to move him, Naruto. Bring a doctor here fast. Not needing to be told twice, Naruto placed both hands on a ram seal and phased from existence. A special Shunshin Sakura had come up with after Kakashi taught her how to create her own. She liked using genjutsu on it and was very creative. A few minutes later Naruto re-emerged on the rooftop using his special Shunshin, this time being accompanied by the ever-reliable Dr. Teruya, who was carrying a bag full of supplies. She instructed Kakashi to keep working on stabilizing him while she started to work on the more serious of his injuries. The damage is very extensive, Kakashi. I'm sure this is the work of Futon Jutsu. The seasoned Jonin furrowed his brow in thought as he kept on landing his assistants. Wind jutsu isn't common in the fire country, let alone Konoha. It was very possible that Hate was attacked by a foreign shinobi, and it just so happened that Konoha currently had visitors from a village known for their mastery of wind. He's stable enough, said Dr. Teruya, interrupting Kakashi's thoughts. Let's take him to the hospital. Waking up to a white ceiling you don't recognize and a smell of antiseptic all over the place is no one's definition of a good time. It certainly wasn't when your name is Gecko Hate and you were sure that you were supposed to be dead. If the other world was all like this, Hate started to think this was just the beginning of an unpleasant eternity. Rise and shine, Sleeping Beauty. He recognized the voice but found it incredibly hard to turn his gaze or speak back to it. Why was the light in this place so damn bright? WWATER. He managed to somewhat request that glorious and refreshing liquid through rasps and was awarded with a careful and soft hand pressing a glass of water in his lips as the other one softly caressed his hair. You scared the shit out of me, Hate. I'm sorry. Well, he had somehow managed to stay alive long enough for his beautiful girlfriend to save him and bring him to the hospital. Apparently one more thing he owed to Yojao. How did you find me? He asked softly and then went into a fit of coughs, not that it wasn't normal for him to cough all the time. This one was just unbelievably painful. I didn't, you got really lucky. She put the glass of water back into the nightstand next to his bed and took a seat behind him. It was then he took his time to analyze the room and realize he couldn't recognize it. Hate had spent a great deal of his childhood in the hospital and was pretty sure this all-white room with no windows and a single door was not what a regular hospital room should look like. Where are we? He asked. This is a special room in the hospital reserved for UMBU personnel and high-ranking officials. Only a few people know you're here, including the Hokage. That made a lot of sense. It was only right that they had some form of extra security measure in the hospital to keep some information safe. I need to talk to Hokage-sama. He requested coldly, making Yojao sigh. She knew something important must have happened if it warranted a murder attempt on him, so it didn't come off as a surprise that he would request a meeting as soon as possible. A small part of her still wished she could hold him a little while longer to convince herself that he really is there. The devoted UMBU put her mask back on and swiftly left the room, only to re-enter it again, this time with the Hokage, Kakashi-senpai, and a kid. Hokage-sama. Why is he here? He asked, his gaze never leaving the figure of the kid standing right behind Kakashi. Naruto-kun here was the one who found you on that roof, Hate. He is here because he wished to see if you were doing okay. Hiruzen conveniently left out the part where Naruto refused to go back and stubbornly claimed that he wouldn't leave until he knew what was going on. It was those moments that reminded Hiruzen of a fiery woman with Uzumaki blood and crimson red hair. Oh, he said, realizing he had been saved by a kid he just now recognized as a participant in the Chunin exams and one of the most promising in his opinion. He smiled kindly at him and said, "Thanks for saving me, Naruto-kun. I didn't do much really, Kakashi Kakashi-sensei was the one who saved you." Tobia. He replied nervously as he waved his hands frantically in front of him, still not used to praise and trying his best to behave like a professional shinobi. Hate chuckled and went into another fit of coughs. After he recovered, his gaze met the Hokage's and he shared with him the information that had put him in this state. Hokage-sama, Suna and Oto have allied themselves to invade Konoha the day of the finals. The bomb was dropped and everyone in the room had very different expressions in their faces. Naruto started thinking that maybe he shouldn't have insisted of sticking with Hiruzen for this. Quickly regaining his composure, the legendary Hokage took over the room. "This is not to leave this room, Naruto, am I clear?" he asked, getting a yes Hokage-sama from the shocked teenager. "Are you certain of this, Hayate-kun?" the Hokage asked as he looked him straight in the eyes. "Yes, I was on patrol when I stumbled upon a genin of this village I recognized from the exams talking with one of the Jonin senseis from Suna. They were talking about the invasion and some weapon they plan on releasing during the finals." Hayate's comment lit a fuse in Kakashi's head, who immediately connected the genin from this village to the person who had slipped his tongue in front of Naruto. "It's Gaara," Naruto commented suddenly, reminding everyone that a genin was a part of the conversation. "Sensei told me the villages use their jinhyuriki as weapons." Hiruzen had been very reluctant to allow his grandson face a jinhyuriki in the tournament, and now knowing it was a part of some sort of scheme, he was doubting it even more. "We must deal with this immediately. We should let it happen." Everyone looked at Kakashi like he had grown a second head until he elaborated further in his explanation. "We know what they're planning and should use that knowledge to our favor. If we hint that we know of their plans, they might change them, and that would put us at a disadvantage." Kakashi would make a great Hokage, and Hiruzen had always been certain of it. "Tora!" called Hiruzen, and a brown-haired Umbu with a lion mask made its way into the room and knelt in front of the Hokage. "I want you to start mobilizing our forces. The day of the finals, Umbu are to infiltrate the civilian population and be ready for evacuation." "It will be done." He was about to dismiss himself but was stopped by the firm hand of Hiruzen. "A jinhyuriki will most likely be let loose on the village during the invasion. I need you to make use of your special talent to deal with it. "I can help," said Naruto, all of a sudden earning looks of shock from the people present in the room, well, everyone except Kakashi. "I'm going to face him anyway, and I've been training with Erosenin and Kakashi-sensei to beat him." "Naruto-kun, I will be the first to admit that your progress in Fuinjutsu is incredible, but I don't think you will be able to help in this scenario. Should he release the power of his beast during your match, you won't fight him any further." The Hokage had a caring tone in his voice, but Naruto understood it was an order. Still, he had more to offer than just some seals. This was supposed to be a surprise, but Naruto clapped both hands together and started concentrating his energy. Purple chakras started swirling around him, and everyone could feel a change in the room. Suddenly, out of Naruto's forearms, two beautiful chains of golden chakra emerged and swirl around. One of them taking Hiruzen's Hokage hat from his head and putting it in Naruto's. "I think I should be able to help just fine." He was working hard not to burst out laughing at the looks of everyone in the room. He especially found Hiruzen's ridiculous face hilarious. He had made it a point of showing off right there and there. He definitely didn't need as much chakra as he used to manifest his chains, but it had the desired effect of dropping everyone's jaws on the floor. "So." Naruto started shifting his feet as he turned his gaze to the ground, which had suddenly become very interesting. It definitely wasn't because of Jireya's scrutinizing look. "What's it gonna be, pervert?" A tick mark appeared in Jireya's face and he loudly corrected Naruto in the middle of the clearing. "I'm not a pervert, you brat. I'm a super pervert." His look then became his normal one, and Naruto finally found himself relaxing and waiting for instruction. "I originally wanted you to learn a jutsu your father created, similar to Kakashi's in nature but not classified as an assassination jutsu, but..." He slumped both of his shoulders and a worried look made its way to his features. "Shit is about to hit the fan, so I'm going to teach you something that will be of greater help to you." "What are you going to teach me, Erosenin?" The question was accompanied by Naruto jumping around in excitement. It truly was amazing how calm he could be at times and then turn into a little joyful fox. "Today, Naruto." The self-proclaimed super pervert bit his thumb and smeared its blood in one of his palms. Then he went through a quick set of hand seals and finished by putting the bloodied palm on the ground as he called out Kuki-yo's no jutsu. The cloud of smoke caused by the jutsu dissipated and it revealed Jiraiya standing on top of a red toad holding a scroll in its tongue. "You're going to learn how to summon toads. Ierosanin, can I really?" he asked as he stuttered in shock and excitement. "Ha ha 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 ha." Jiraiya boasted in laughter as the toad carrying the scroll returned to its realm, leaving him behind with the scroll. "What's the matter, brat? Don't tell me you're that easy to impress." He was of course aware that it was not so easy, but Naruto hadn't really been impressed by him so far, so this was gold for him. Reining in on his laughter, he let the scroll unfold in front of Naruto and explained to him how to sign the contract that would allow him to become a summoner. Naruto didn't think about it twice and hurriedly bit his thumb and used the blood to write his name right next to a name he was oh so familiar with. Namikaze Minato. You've seen the hand seals already. All you have to do is use some blood in the palm of your dominant hand and put it in the ground after you're done with the sequence. Jiraiya walked a little farther from him to give him enough space and added, "This is a very chakra extensive technique, Naruto. If you use too little you won't be able to do much." He went about trying to summon a toad, and just as Jiraiya predicted, Naruto only summoned a toadpole, which he found incredibly amusing as he observed from the sides. A technique like this is not something you would normally teach genin, especially not when it implies summoning creatures as big as battle toads, but Jiraiya knew Naruto had more than enough chakra for it. Even by Uzumaki standards, Naruto has an incredible amount of chakra, greater by far than any jonin in the village, including Kakashi. Not him of course, but you don't reach the level a Sunin has for nothing. Still, Naruto had about half the amount of chakra he does, and that's very impressive. "You need to use more chakra, Naruto. I know you have the control for it." He didn't blame him for using the amount he did, as it was necessary to regulate how much chakra one uses for their techniques, but the Kuki-yo's no jutsu is a completely different story. Having decided it was all or nothing, Naruto stopped to gather his energy and let it out in a single use. Purple chakra started swirling around him and he went through the set of hand seals one more time. Kuki-yo's no jutsu. A massive cloud of smoke filled the clearing, and when it dissipated it revealed Naruto standing on top of a gigantic red toad with a pipe in its mouth, wearing a dark blue haori. "Why have you summoned me here, Jiraiya? You know I hate it when you summon me for nothing." The toad had a powerful and deep voice that was capable of filling the whole clearing, which only seemed to excite Naruto even more. "Oi! I was the one who I was the dash." Exhaustion suddenly took over him and he couldn't finish his sentence as he collapsed and fell from the head of the toad. He lost consciousness in mid-air and didn't get to see the look of surprise in the toad's face as it saw him fall. Luckily, Jiraiya had been all too ready for such an event and jumped in just in time to catch Naruto and land safely with him in his arms right in front of the summon. "What do you think of our new summoner Bunta?" he asked teasingly, knowing very well that the incredible Gamabunta, boss of the Toad Summons, had a soft spot for Minato back in the day. He would obviously recognize Naruto. "To think he would be able to summon me of all people at such a young age. Minato would be proud of his brat." His comment made Jiraiya chuckle warmly as he looked at Naruto's sleeping form with something akin to longing in his face. "I'm sorry he summoned you without a real reason, Bunta. I clearly underestimated how much chakra he used. He isn't quite ready for a boss summon just yet. I just hope he'll be able to summon Ken safely." His worried tone wasn't lost on Gamabunta, who could clearly see something was troubling Jiraiya. Why would he need to summon someone as big as Gamaken? Even in his powerful voice one could hear he was weary of the answer. Jiraiya hardened his gaze and looked at the giant toad. "I will probably give you a lot of work soon, Bunta." Apparently that was enough for him as he nodded his understanding and released himself to go back to his realm. Jiraiya started walking back to the village with an unconscious Naruto in his arms and couldn't help but think, "I just hope you're ready, Naruto." I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you liked it, subscribe to my channel for more fan fictions like this, and goodbye.